Hello, everybody, and welcome in to part three of our Index Universal Life Sales Academy. I'm joined by Dylan Krings from Ameritas. My name is Matt Alina. I'm the Life Markets Manager here. And if you've missed the first two webinars that we've done on this, you've really, I don't want to say you've missed out because you do have the ability to go back and watch the trainings that we've done on demand. But we talked in week number one, we talked about just an introduction and talked about Index Universal Life Sales, what they do, how they work, that type of thing. Last week, in week number two, we talked about how to position Index Universal Life in your sales pitch. How do you present it? Some of the frequently asked questions like, I don't see an age 100 guarantee, or what happens in this scenario. We talked about how to sell to business owners and how to sell to individual people just looking to protect their family. This week, we're going to be talking about and handling the IUL Skeptic. The skeptic may be you, it may be your client, it may be a combination, but we're going to be talking about how to address the skepticism of Index Universal Life that's out there. There is a stigma out there. So again, Dylan, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to congratulate the newly promoted regional sales manager, Kevin Batrip, but he's under the weather today. So get well soon, Kevin. And great to have you guys on here again. And we really appreciate what Ameritas has done. So Dylan, just to kind of catch everybody up, last time in part number two, we talked about no life guarantees, no worries. We explained that when you see those guarantees on those sales proposals and you see that it may run 10, 15, 20, 25 years or whatever, you see that is the doomsday, meaning that the market index is performing less than zero year after year after year after year. We talked about how to properly fund IULs by designing the illustrations to show the client either paying target or max funding it to stay ahead of cost of insurance and to be able to enjoy the upside potential of those market indexes. We talked about how to position IULs for business owners, those golden handcuffs to recruit, retain, and reward those key employees, and also how to set it up so that mom and dad have the life insurance protection that they need as they're raising their family, as they're taking care of their mortgage and other expenses, but then having that little nest egg that's been working alongside of that they can now use as a way to supplement their retirement. So let's talk a little bit here, Dylan, about just kind of where we are now in Index Universal Life and where that came into the picture. So the original form of life insurance started back as whole life. It's still available today. But here in the United States, whole life insurance was introduced around in the 1840s. And what it does is it provides guaranteed premiums, guaranteed death benefits, guaranteed cash values. Some of the policies even include dividends, and they can do paid up additions and things like that. It is the most expensive form of life insurance because it offers all of these guarantees. Remember, it's providing guarantees to age 100, 120. It's providing cash value growth regardless of the stock market, regardless of what's going on in the economy. They're still guaranteeing that they're going to give you cash value. They have to make up for those down years, folks. That's why it's one of the more expensive forms of life insurance. Fast forward to about 1980, all the way to present day, Universal Life was kind of a spin-off of the whole life plan, where it is a policy that builds cash values. And keep in mind, when Universal Life was introduced into the life insurance world in the United States, interest rates were a lot higher. So people would pay their premiums, that money would grow into that cash value bucket, covering cost of insurance. And at that time, interest rates were 8, 9, 10, 11% or higher, depending on the company, depending on the product. And then what happened as time went on, those interest rates took a deep nosedive. And people that stopped funding those universal life policies or stopped funding them properly, they started getting lapse notices. Put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. That's when life insurance companies then went to guaranteed ULs. Basically, low interest rate environment will, as long as you pay this premium, regardless of the performance of the cash value, the death benefit is then guaranteed regardless of the performance, as long as they pay their premiums and they leave whatever cash value alone, they leave that cash value alone. If they were to take some of that money out as a loan or withdrawal, then of course that would turn into, that would basically throw those guarantees out the window. So they put in those GULs, that's still out there today. Basically, it works like a lifetime term. In 1995-ish, companies came out with Index Universal Life. Again, just like a traditional universal life policy, it's a flexible premium adjustable life plan where the interest rates are tied to the market indices. Most people put it towards the S&P 500. That's what they know. But there's other market indices. It does have higher growth, cash value growth potential. It provides stronger guarantees. It is a win-win for all of us. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Is for the IUL Skeptic, you're going to hear some of the different moving parts of a index universal life policy. So Dylan, this is where I'm going to bring you in, and I need your expertise here to explain to everybody on here. You hear about participation rate. Some companies will have that 100% participation rate, 130, 140, and so on. What is participation rate? What does that do? How does that impact the plan? And why does it matter for us as advisors that are developing the proposals? And how do we explain that to our clients?
Yeah, great question, Matt. And I went off camera just to fix my connection. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. But participation rate, you guys are going to see this on a number of index options in IUL. What the participation rate is, really, you guys can think of this as a sort of multiplier. So you're going to see participation rates 120%, 100%, maybe even 180% or higher. So think of it as a multiplier tied to an index. And let's just say that index has a cap, let's say 10% with a 150% participation rate. If that index does hit that 10%, then we're going to factor in that participation rate. We take that 10% times 150%. That would actually credit the client 15% on that index option. So why that matters? Participation rate, it does give your client the potential to earn more on just the initial index and how it performs. So the big thing here, you're going to see all these sorts of participation rates. Some will be very high, but it does matter that the initial index itself is performing good.
Yep.
If you have a 250% participation rate, but the index itself is performing at 0% or 1%, that high participation rate does not matter too much. But it is a nice feature. It can make an impact for the clients and the IUL that they sign up with.
I've seen some index universal life plans, and I know it's not with Ameritas, but there's some that'll say like a 80% or 90% participation rate. Would you recommend staying away from those types of plans where there's at least not 100% participation rate or that particular index?
Yeah, Matt, great question. I think it can vary. Again, it depends on the cap rate, but typically what we see, and at least at Ameritas, what we offer, participation rate commonly is going to be 100% or more. So the big thing is the initial index, how that performs. You know, if that index has a cap rate of, let's say, 20% and the participation rate is 80%, if it's maxing out every year, that's not a bad return, but something to pay attention to, definitely.
Yeah. So if there's a participation rate of 150 or 200%, then it's really the ability to multiply those returns. Is that fair to say?
Yep, exactly. You got it, Matt.
Okay, perfect. So let's move on to our next question. And you mentioned the word caps. What are caps? How does that impact a plan? Why does it matter? And do caps fluctuate?
Very good question as well. So the cap, think of it, everyone, as a ceiling. We're going to talk about floors, but a cap is going to be the ceiling, kind of the most that your client can offer for a specified year or common year with that index option. So the reason that's going to impact the plan, just as it kind of sounds, we're capping it at that point in time. So let's just say that 10% cap, if the index truly performs at, say, 14%, the client's going to get credited 10%. And the extra 4% would go to, say, the insurance carrier. That kind of goes hand in hand with the risk of what the index is being invested into. So on those high years, those high performing years, you might miss out a little bit, but think of the low performing years too. If the market is negative, your client's going to be protected from loss. So the cap is there as a ceiling, but it still gives your client plenty of potential to earn, especially with the tax deferred accumulation in an IUL over, say, 20 or 30 years. And the one question you have, Matt, it does say, do the caps fluctuate? And that answer is yes. So over time, all insurance carriers, all IUL products, you guys will see the cap rates fluctuate. Some years, they may be the same. So maybe for a 3-year span, the cap is going to be identical. But over time, you guys should see cap rates fluctuate, which is not uncommon.
Yeah. And that's all dictated. Is it more, when you see the caps fluctuate, is it more of a reaction to the market indexes, or is it more of a projection?
Yeah, a little bit of both, Matt. It's going to be kind of on the market indexes, how the economy is performing, interest rates within the economy. So one of my slides here, we used to have a very high cap, or a 12% cap. Now we're a bit lower, and that's just due to market conditions. So what you guys are seeing on the slide here, and just to give you an example, specifically with Ameritas IULs, our first accumulation IUL product, the Excel Plus IUL 2011. On the left-hand side, the third column, you can see what the cap rate is. Starting October 2011, and then the end date, October 2012, that's your 1 year point to point. You can see the cap rate was 12%. The rate of return on the right side is about 15%. So this is a true example of where that client hit the cap of that 12%. And then you can see just a month later, this would be for a new client signing up. So point to point, it's 1 year. So a client, if they got in November, that cap rate was 11.5%. And again, they hit that cap of 11.5%. If you just go down the page, you can see in 2023 to 2024, that cap rate was 8.75%. And the client hit that cap at 8.75%. So the Excel Plus IUL, everyone, that is a closed product at Ameritas. We no longer sell that product because we came out with a new one, and that's going to be the Growth IUL. So what you're going to see on the Growth IUL is also the cap rates, the credited rates. But what I want you guys to pay attention to is at the bottom with those green boxes. We talked about this on previous webinars, but you can see that the cap rates almost nearly identical. So you can see the Excel Plus from 2011 and the Growth IUL on the right-hand side. There's a 0.25% cap gap. So having that long-term potential on an IUL, very important to your client's long-term accumulation and the potential that they have. The reason I call this out a 0.25% cap gap, part of the reason for that, we came out with the Growth IUL. It's a newer product. The cost structure is a little more competitive. Very close cap rates though. You guys will come across some products in the marketplace where the cap gap, and what we define as the cap gap, is a carrier's current accumulation IUL product and the cap rate versus their old IUL product. You guys will see some cap gaps are going to be 4 or 5%, where the client really takes a big haircut compared to the new product, say if they signed up years ago. So pay attention to that. It is something to be familiar with as you guys work and sell in the IUL market.
And that's a good point. One of the things for the audience today, if you go to the handout section, you will be able to download the Ameritas IUL client brochure. You can look at the historical performance of the Excel Plus IUL, and then also the historical performance of the growth IUL. And just so you have that, it's a great visual. It's a great use of being able to show the client the historical performance and why this is a solid product, something that is going to not only provide them the life insurance protection, but also the cash value growth all at the same time. And next week in part 4, we're going to show you and provide you with the full Ameritas story and what is so that you will be able to experience or be able to get an idea of the Ameritas difference and why we've expanded our partnership and relationship with Ameritas, and why now's the time to get on board and start taking advantage of all the products that Ameritas has to offer. So continuing on, talking to the IUL skeptic, we mentioned caps, we mentioned participation rate. Let's talk about floors. And this is where you may have heard of the phrase zero is the hero. But Dylan, what are floors? How does that impact the plan? And do floors go below zero?
Yeah, good question, Matt. And you kind of said it. To put it in short, zero is the hero. So what a floor is, it is the absolute minimum of what your client could be subject to. So in most cases, you're going to see the floor is typically 0%. And the reason that's going to impact the plan, your client is protected from loss. So you can tell your client on their initial investment for the life of their policy, they're going to be protected from loss. So if the market does negative 10%, they hit that 0% floor. They don't bear the brunt of that loss. It's the insurance carrier that does. So their money is protected. That's going to help their performance. So if you have a few good years where, let's say, you earn 8%, if you have a 0% year, again, you're protected from loss. Your client is not losing money on the gains that they had previously. And then, do floors go below zero? I myself, Matt, have not seen any floors below zero. I'll let you speak to that if you have. I know you work with quite a few IULs.
I have not. So yeah, that's where the whole story of zero is the hero. Another way that I've learned for index universal life products and kind of explaining it in kind of a sports theme. We're going into it's NFL playoff time, Super Bowl, all that stuff. It's kind of like if you've got 1st and 10, and let's say you hand the ball off to your running back, they run for 7 yards. Now it's 2nd and 3 to get to that next first down, and let's say you get sacked for a 20-yard loss. It's always 1st and 3. You never lose. So when you get to enjoy, the client gets to enjoy the gains without suffering the losses. Variable universal life, we've heard of VULs. We don't have access to them through our licensure here. We don't do anything with securities. But with VULs, some of those VULs that are out there, yeah, the clients get to enjoy a really nice return, but they also get to suffer in those losses. if you go back to when the mortgage bubble burst back in the, was it 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, when people were losing 40, 50% of their retirement. If you told them that you weren't going to gain anything, but you weren't going to lose anything, do you think you would be a hero today? Absolutely, you would. So that's where a floor is important. And that's where you have to explain to the client that anything that you gain, you get to keep it. It's where you don't get to lose. There is no loss. You don't take the L. You just don't get you don't get the you don't get to you don't get that major win. But in the flip side, your clients do get to enjoy the upside. Now, keep in mind, there are caps. We've talked about that. So it helps the insurance companies when, let's say, the market performs at 14%, it's capped at 10. That's when they get to benefit on that 4% gain, where they can pocket that. But let's face it, they're going to give it back to you or back to the consumer. That's how they're able to mitigate some of that loss in those down years. And those down years don't happen very often. One of the questions, kind of talking about caps, participation rate. One of the things that that I wanted to ask, and it's not on the slide, is, oh gosh, I just lost my question.
Nope, I'll let it come to you, Matt. And love the analogy with football. And one other thing I'll comment on the floor. We asked, does the floor go below 0? No, it does not, which is great. One thing you guys will want to look out for, some IUL products have a floor of 2 or 3% just to guarantee client some sort of return. So one of our products, and there's others like it in the marketplace, it's called the Value Plus IUL at Ameritas. We have a 3% look back guarantee for the first 10 years of the policy. So it kind of acts as a floor, and it's guaranteeing to the client, if your policy does not average the first 10 years 3% each year, we will true you up so you get that gain the first 10 years, kind of kickstarting the policy. So keep an eye out for those products as well. Having that minimum guaranteed floor, 2%, 3%, that is also a nice feature to have.
So some of the regulations in the industry have kind of tried to level the playing field, so to speak. But some of the IULs still show illustrations of 6%, 7%, 8%, and so on. Is that realistic, Dylan?
Yeah, Matt, this is something that we've sort of discussed on previous sessions as well. So if everyone on this call, if you look at the S&P 500 index, every IUL has it. Historically, that index is averaging about 10%, or the S&P in general averages about 10%. So when you illustrate at 6, 7, 8%, it should be pretty realistic. You can feel pretty confident in that. The one thing I would call out where some agents, some advisors can get in trouble down the road or reviewing with their clients underperformance, you guys need to just keep an eye out for some of those multipliers, some of those non-guarantees that kind of inflate the illustration. That's something to be aware of. But generally speaking, 6, 7, 8%, that is something you can be pretty confident in. At Ameritas, we illustrate at 5.92%. So we would rather under promise, over deliver.
Yep.
And I think if something seems too good to be true, stress test it. We call it stress testing. Set the illustrated rate to 5% and just see how it performs. Stack it up against another illustration, and that will give you a very good idea, say, if something might be too good to be true.
Yep. And I think we talked about this in a previous webinar as well, is setting up when you're running the proposals, that you set it up where the client is at least paying target or above target, so that again they can get a stronger product, and they're really getting that money, that the premiums that they're putting into the policy, to work on their behalf. So For that IUL skeptic, Dylan, what are some words of advice for the insurance advisor that they can confidently propose IUL products to their customers? Some of their clients, some of the people on here, they've heard of Index Universal Life, but they've never actively sold it, and some have sold it but they've been kind of skeptical of doing the same thing. How can our audience confidently propose IULs?
Yeah, this is a great topic here, guys. So one thing to just point out right away, telling is not selling. So you need to build that kind of emotional bond with your client, and this is going to make you feel confident going into the sale. So what I mean by that, when you meet with a client, get to know them and what their concerns are. Ask them, what would happen if you passed away tomorrow? What would your wife or your husband and kids do? How much money do you anticipate you need for retirement? What are your concerns for retirement? Are you concerned about health, health claims going up, or some sort of health condition later on in life? How would you pay for that? Retirement income, do you want it taxed? Liquidity, what are your concerns there? They're going to go through a number of options and tell you, yes, death benefit's a concern, health is a concern, most likely. And then they're going to want tax-free retirement income. No one wants to be paying taxes. So then this is you have the IUL in your back pocket, and you confidently know at this point, I have a product that is going to address nearly all of their needs, or all of them all together. And this is where you can ask your client, hey, Matt, if I had a product that would address all of these needs, you're protected from loss, it can give you tax-free income and death benefit, health benefit for your family, would you be opposed to me showing you an illustration? No. Knowing their concerns, that will allow you to confidently propose an IUL product, and it's free to show them an illustration. Most clients will not be opposed to you helping them addressing their concerns.
What I liked in that is talking about the tax-free retirement income. Nobody, doesn't matter if you're a multi-billionaire or just somebody that has a small nest egg, and nobody wants to pay Uncle Sam money. If they can get tax-free money, why not? Why not? So I think that that I like that story. You've got to get to know people. And the other thing too, to kind of compound what you just said, Dylan, is telling is not selling. It's really showing the client the value. You've got to show them the value and have them buy into that value. And one of the things that we're developing here internally at URL for you to use, and I'm trying to work with our IT marketing teams, is to put together a checklist, like a client questionnaire that will help you discover what is keeping your clients up at night. If it's their, if they go into a nursing home, are they going to have the money for that, or do they need a life insurance policy that has living benefits, stuff like that? We'll talk more about that, because Ameritas living benefits, top notch. But I don't want to spoil next week's webinar. So I like that, and so keep that in mind. Is really getting to know the client, finding out what keeps them up at night, and then say, hey, do you mind if I show you something that will check off most of those boxes that are keeping you up at night? So you already kind of talked about this, and like keeping it simple, what should advisors say to the average client, and what an IUL is, and how the IUL plan will benefit them. It's life insurance first and foremost, that provides a tax-free death benefit, avoids probate should they die, have an untimely death. But it also provides cash value that is tax deferred, and provides that money in their retirement years. We kind of talked about this, but Dylan, one of the things I know as, and I've been learning this I've been learning from this uh, webinar series that we've been doing, um, and because I've always been afraid of this as well, is when I'm running proposals for our brokers, our partners here. One of the things that I'm afraid of is having egg on my face. Like I'm making a recommendation so I know advisors' biggest fear is egg on their face recommending an underperforming IUL. Um, what's that vote of confidence would you say to them? And we'll use Ameritas's products. And I know historical look back. When you have those down years, um, what do you say? There's typically a rebound, right?
There is, yeah, a rebound. I mean, speaking on a down year, guys, let's say you have a great year and the market shoots up and let's say you hit that cap of 10%, but the next year the market really takes a tumble and negative 20%. Well, that tumble, it's not such a bad thing because typically what we see the market do is it bounces back and shoots back up. So if you start at a lower point, if the index starts at a lower point than before, there's a good chance they could have a heck of a year the next year and hit that cap, or for uncapped strategies, even do better. So a down year is not always bad. They are going to happen. But from what we've seen historically, the client will rebound and they're going to capture some gains. But when we speak of underperforming IULs, I think the big thing here for everyone, especially if you're new to IUL, is just do your homework. Over time, you're going to become more confident, more familiar with these products. And if you're brand new, reach out to Matt, reach out to us. We can tell you if you are structuring the IUL correctly, if you're funding it at target, if you're max funding it. That's ideally what we want to look for. And then previously we discussed the 7 red flags of IUL. So Ameritas has a write-up on that. We do not participate in any of them, but it kind of calls out what some products we see in the industry use. It's just going to make you aware of maybe what is a red flag. So if something looks too good to be true, I always recommend either illustrating it at 5% and then comparing it to a few different illustrations. So if you have product 1, it looks fantastic, but maybe too good to be true. Run a different product, maybe 2 other products, and compare all 3 of them and just see if one sticks out more than the other. If it's really out of the water, run them all at 5% and then see. And if that product 1 is still outperforming the others, you could feel pretty confident that's a good product.
Yep. And if people don't have access to that software, folks, I do it all day long. This is about 85% of my job is running proposals for people. So if you want to say, hey, stress test this, I'll be happy to do it. I can run it against all of the different index programs that are out there. So wanted to ask this question. This was the question. You mentioned it. You used the word point to point. What is point to point? I meant to ask that earlier, just for people's education. When you say annual point to point, what does that mean?
Yeah, point to point, guys, that is going to be kind of start to finish. So with an IUL, you have what we call sweep dates. And with Ameritas, it's going to be typically the 10th, 20th, and 30th of the month. So let's say that 2 days from now, I start an IUL, February 1st. We're going to put that in the point to point of February 10th, since the 30th already passed. So that client's point to point will run February 10th of this year to February 10th of 2026. And then we're going to start a new point to point. So after that year hits the point to point, that's where we credit the client the interest gained on their IUL and we start a new one. One thing you guys will see, there's options out there for 2-year point to points. So in some cases, you could go from 2025 to 2027. Often those 2-year point to points, they have higher caps, which is a good thing. It can also be somewhat not a good thing. So with the 2-year point to point, let's say that the first year you do fantastic, you gain 12%, but then year 2, you lose 20%. Well, now you're negative, you're going to hit a 0% floor instead of capturing that first year gain of 12%. So keep that in mind. But you can mix 1-year point to point strategies with 2-year point to points, and you can change your options over the lifetime of your client's IUL.
How often is that something you could do, like every month, or is it something you can do once a year? How often does Ameritas let the client change the different index accounts?
Yep, Ameritas and other carriers in general, typically it's going to be one time per year. And you would not want to be switching it every single month, guys, because then you're really starting like a new month, a new point to point, and you're not capturing any gains. So one time per year is the typical.
Yeah. So to kind of give everybody another little visual, so they get a policy today. February 10th is the first is 0.1. It's going to go to February 10th of 2026. And you know that the S&P is going to be riding a roller coaster all year long, ups and downs, ups and downs. But what you're going to be looking at is the starting point and the end point, that point to point. If you're up from, let's say, 8% or 10% between February 10th of 25 to February 10th of 26, your client's going to get 10%. So, and then it starts over again. Now you've got February 10th of 26 to 27. So you're going to have that's the up and downs. You're going to have the roller coaster, but at the end of the day, it's it's your starting point and your finish point, what you get credited, and then it starts that calendar. It's an annual reset. So that's also a good thing. So keep that in mind, and what it means for point to point. In part 4, which is next week, same time, same channel, we're going to talk about the Ameritas IUL story. We're going to take a deeper dive into their portfolio. Dylan and Kevin have been gracious to just talk IULs and not really promote the Ameritas story and the Ameritas products per se. We're going to get into product specifics. We're also going to be talking about their exceptional living benefits. This is heads and tails above any of the other living benefits that you see out there. We're going to talk about the different market index accounts that they offer, and really just experiencing the Ameritas difference. So just keep that in mind. Again, that's going to be part 4, and that will conclude our Index Universal Life Sales Academy. And of course, we'll have this available on demand whenever you want to go back and see some of these recordings. We'll take some questions and answers and get those questions answered for you. So Ed, I appreciate your kind words there. I'm glad you liked the metaphor that, with the football sacks showing the zero floor. Dylan, Ed asked, does Ameritas use multipliers?
Good question, Ed. We do not use multipliers. Well, let me back up here. The only multipliers we use are guaranteed. So in years 11 and beyond, we guarantee a 0.15% account value bonus. You will see that multiplier used on the illustration. So the numbers will start to grow after year 10, even a bit more than they did previously. But for non-guarantees, we do not use any multipliers.
Awesome. Great. Ed, I also appreciate, he said, he said to you and me here, Dylan, that we definitely approach IULs with great integrity, and he appreciates that. At the end of the day, it's about helping those customers, those clients of yours, and helping you as an advisor. And if we're promoting bad products, we're not going to be in business very long. I mentioned before, I don't want egg on my face. I know Dylan doesn't want egg on his face. And we want sound products, and we want to be able to provide sound advice. So, Ed, I appreciate that. Of course, if there's any questions at the end of these presentations after we've parted ways, you can always give me a call or you can shoot me a text message. I'm on the phone throughout the day and running proposals and meetings, and you know the drill. We're all busy. But my number is 717-216-8041. You can also email me at matta@urlinsgroup.com, and I'll provide you with any of the sales resources that we have. I'm happy to run proposals, answer questions, all of that good stuff. So I appreciate everybody's time and attention today. Dylan, I appreciate your expertise as well. That's going to conclude part 3. Next week is part 4 and our final of our training series. So thanks a lot, everybody. Make it a great day on purpose, and we're here to help best we can. So thanks again for your partnership, your attention, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone.